Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Hack, and in today's video, I am coming at you with another solo PVE build. This time back on the Magicka Sorcerer class with the solo build updated for the Scalebreaker DLC. Now, even with all the changes going on in the meta right now, in my opinion, Scalebreaker is one of the best patches to play solo builds in, especially on our Sorcerer. I mean, we've got good damage shields, we've got passive dot damage, passive pet damage, great healing and survivability. So if you're looking for a great solo build, whether it's dungeons, vet dungeons, VMA, world bosses, whatever, Magicka Sorcerer is a very strong choice this patch. As usual, we'll go over the stats, the gear set options, skills, champion points, and more coming up next. Alright everybody, here we go, back on the solo Mag Sorc. I actually have been enjoying this build quite a lot. I've been soloing a lot of dungeons, just flipping through world bosses lately, and it's really a really fun build to play, which was surprising because there's a lot of negative surrounding the Scalebreaker DLC. Like I said in the intro, this is probably the best time to play a solo build because we have so much just passive dots and passive healing that it makes soloing in ESO easier than ever, in my opinion. So that being said, this is for the Scalebreaker patch. Just keep that in mind when I go over the skills. Many of these may be changing. It's too early to tell, really, but this will be a Scalebreaker build, so keep that in mind. Also, it's a solo build, so your stats will not be purely DPS focused. We're talking about how do we survive, how do we do healing, how do we keep our damage shields up while doing damage passively at the same time, so we can solo some really challenging stuff in ESO. So starting with our buff stats here, let me just chug a potion and then take a look at our character sheet here. So we're sitting at about 37k max magicka, almost 19k health, and 15k stamina, all really good numbers for a solo build. About 1500 magicka recovery and 700 stamina recovery. For spell damage, we're sitting at 2100, and that's just without our buffs. So actually, if I were to use our weapon damage enchant, and then throw on entropy for major sorcery, we have 3k spell damage, and then this actually goes up to 4k total spell damage with some of our sets that we're running. We have two sets here which are not going to show up on the stat sheet, but that gives us over 4k spell damage, which is really good. And then 55% spell critical. Come here, dude. Come back. There you go. Pets. 55% spell critical, and then about 16k spell resistance, 15k physical resistance. Obviously, this is a light armor build. We're using our damage shields to mitigate most of that damage. Now I'm putting everything into max magicka here, 64 points. And a vampire on this build, at least stage 2 is going to give you the extra magicka and stamina recovery, which is really good. You can go all the way up to stage 4 if you want, or you can drop the vampire completely. It's not a huge difference, but I do enjoy the extra recovery. And for the Mundus, I definitely recommend Thief with this particular setup. That's because I don't have any spell critical buffs. And we want a pretty decent crit rating because that affects our healing, right? Our passive healing is based on crit damage. So this gets us to about 55% spell crit, which is going to help very much with the healing. Purple tri-stat food is what we want here. This gives us a good amount of max health, max magicka, and max stamina, all of which are really important on the solo build. And then minor protection, major prophecy. We'll talk about how we get those juicy buffs in a minute. For our potion here, I just showed it briefly. All I use on this build is Essence of Magicka. Just trash magic potions. It's really good, really cheap. And you should be picking these up regardless. We have all the buffs that we need on Mag Sorc. We have passive spell crit, and then we'll be getting our spell damage boost as well. So yeah, basic potions. That's all you need. And then let's talk about the race here. I am High Elf still on my Mag Sorc. And I do really like it for soloing. You've got the spell recharge passive, which is good for sustain. 64 Magicka or stamina back every 6 seconds based on whichever is lowest. So this is going to help, especially in the stamina department, if you have a very challenging fight where you need to roll dodge or block or break free. This is going to help bring your stamina back up, so I do like that. Then, of course, we have the Max Magicka 2000 bonus Max Magicka there and 258 spell damage, which is really nice. You can do Breton as your choice. That's fine. You just might want an extra stamina recovery glyph. You could do Khajiit, Dark Elf as well. Those are all fine. All right, so I think that covers the basics. Let's jump into the gear sets next. Now, I am using some kind of non-meta gear sets, which I just kind of tried out because I wanted to see if they worked. And they do work really, really well. So I'm going to go over kind of the non-meta solo sets that I'm using for this build. Keep in mind you can switch these out. You can do more meta sets like Mother's Sorrow, Spinners, whatever. That stuff is fine. I'm just trying some a little bit more unique sets that I kind of think really work for what I'm trying to do on a solo build, and it's a fun build. So starting off with our first 5-piece set, I went with the Spider Cultist set. This is from the Fungal Grotto dungeon, so it's not very difficult to get. It's one of the easiest dungeons in the game, but you will need to run that dungeon if you want this set. It is a light armor set. It gives us spell crit, max magicka, spell damage, and then it adds 434 spell damage to our destruction staff abilities. Now, the reason why I really like this is it's not just destruction staff abilities. This also applies to light and heavy attacks that you're doing with your Destro staff. And since this is kind of like a pet build, almost like a heavy attack pet build, then this set is going to buff our heavy attacks a lot. And obviously it plays into the other damage that we're doing with like our Wall of Elements and our Lightning Staff Dot that we're using this patch in the Scalebreaker DLC, which does huge damage over time. This set just makes sense, it does a lot of damage, and it's pretty easy to get. So I am using the Lightning Staff here, front bar. I have a Sharpened trait here with a shock damage enchant. I think that's going to be best in slot, but you could also do Precise and maybe change up your Mundus if you want. That's another option, or even Infused. So that's our front bar. Then on the back bar, I also recommend a Lightning Staff if you can get 2. And this one, of course, you would want the Infused Lightning Staff on the back bar. That's because we're combining this with our weapon damage enchant. This is giving us about 450 spell damage at gold every 5 seconds, and it has a 5-second cooldown. So you can keep this extra spell damage up 100% of the time if you want. So that's what I would recommend there. Now, if you have access to it, you can also use a Maelstrom staff on your back bar for the Wall of Elements buff there. With this active, our light and heavy attacks get even more damage. You can see 1294 damage to any enemy in your Wall of Elements. So if you have access to this, I definitely recommend slotting that Maelstrom on the back bar. That's going to make your heavy attacks that you're doing on your front bar way, way stronger. It's an insane amount of AoE damage for any enemy that's standing in your Wall of Elements here. I don't have a Lightning Staff. That would be best still. I just have the Inferno, so you can use that as well. Definitely you want Infuse, though, with the weapon and spell damage enchant. So Spider Cultist weapons, that's going to be the easiest way to go on this build. And then you just need 3 more pieces, either on your body or on your jewelry. It literally does not matter. So next 5-piece set that we're using is another pretty interesting set that I picked up recently. And this is going to be the Elemental Succession set. This is from the Orsinium or the Hrothgar DLC. And this is from Maelstrom Arena. If you're not familiar, what it does is it gives you 2-piece max magicka, 3-piece spell damage, 4-piece max magicka again, so those stats are all really good. And then on the 5-piece set here, whenever you deal flame, shock, or frost damage, you gain 531 spell damage for 4 seconds to that element, and this can happen every 4 seconds. You can have multiple different buffs active at the same time. So this set, I believe, did get buffed this patch in the Scalebreaker DLC, and it's really, really good, you guys. I definitely recommend picking this up. You don't need to run Veteran Maelstrom Arena for this. You can get this from the normal Maelstrom Arena. You can run this on your body pieces or your jewelry. I don't recommend going for the staff necessarily because you'll only get that from the final round, so it's going to take quite a long time if you're farming the staff. So I recommend farming the Spider Cultist staff here instead, because that'll be a little bit faster. But this set, you guys, with the new buff, this does more damage than a lot of sets out there. It does more damage than Burning Spellweave does. It does more damage than Spell Strategist even. And then the set also has much better uptimes than any of those sets. It basically can have 100% uptime. So let me show you how it works. So let's say, for instance, I'm doing lightning damage on my front bar staff. You get that little buff on the right. As soon as it's down, it's going to refresh. So there's essentially 100% uptime on this huge spell damage buff. So it is, it's going to take you a little bit of time to farm this if you don't have access to it already, but I think it's well worth it for that spell damage. Now, it is only going to apply to Flame, Shock, or Frost, so that's kind of the downside that I can see. It's not going to buff your magic attacks. So if you're building purely Magicka skills, like let's say Crystal Frags, if you're just doing Magicka damage, then this is not going to help you. But since on my Sorcerer I'm doing basically shock damage for everything except maybe one ability, then this is going to be very good on a Mag-Sorc build if you choose the right skills. So we've got Elemental Succession as our next set, and then finally the monster set should come as no surprise. Just the best solo monster helm in the game is going to be Iceheart. This gives us a very nice bonus to spell critical, and then whenever we deal crit damage, which is all the time on our Mag-Sorc, we get a almost 10k damage shield for 6 seconds. This is automatic anytime you do damage. It's also doing frost damage. Let's see, as far as your traits, I don't have the best traits. Try to pick up divines here. Also, in terms of weights, at least 5 light. You can do 5 light, 1 medium, 1 heavy. If you have Undaunted unlocked, you'll get even more stats. I don't even have Undaunted on this build yet, and the stats are already pretty good. So 5-1-1. You can also do 5-2 heavy for the extra health. I'm running 1 heavy piece right now. The extra health and resistances from heavy armor definitely are good for soloing, so keep that in mind. I think what I have right now is, I'm doing 6 light and then just 1 heavy shoulder, because that's the only shoulder piece I have for this set. So let's jump into the skills next, starting on our front bar. This is a pet build, so we've got the Volatile Familiar as our first skill here. This still does decent AoE damage, as well as the stun effect, and it is shock damage as well. So that's getting buffed by our Elemental Succession. You are getting some very nice passives too as a pet Sorc. So that's why pet Sorc is still worthwhile. At least 1 pet here. I'm not running the Matriarch. I don't think the Matriarch is worth it anymore, but at least having 1 pet here is going to give us a lot of very good passives on the build. Speaking of passives, next up we got Inner Light for the passive Max Magicka. You get also Magicka Recovery from your Mage Guild passives, and we get the passive Major Prophecy, so that's 10% extra spell critical. Very, very good and very needed for our healing on the Magicka Sorcerer. Next up, we do need a damage shield. So we've got Hardened Ward here. Gives a decent sized shield, and it's pretty easy to maintain. We also have that shield, obviously, from Iceheart, which means we have 2 shields stacking on top of each other, which makes the survivability on this setup very, very good. So definitely run that on your front bar. And then Shock Reach. Shock Reach is buffed twice by our sets, which makes it a very strong dot this patch in the Scalebreaker DLC. Since it's both a Destruction Staff skill and a Shock skill, it's getting buffed by both sets, and it's really, really good this patch. For Dragonhold, we'll probably be replacing this with something else, but for now, I definitely recommend this on a Mag-Sorc if you're running this setup. It's really, really good dot damage for sure, as well as Structured Entropy as our next dot. This does very good dot damage as well, and healing every 2 seconds. Plus, this is our source of major sorcery this patch, which is that 20% spell damage buff. You don't want to miss out on that. Now, this is getting tweaked again for Dragonhold, so probably another skill that we might end up dropping next patch, but for now, it's really good for solo builds. You guys definitely pick this up. And then last, for our ultimate on the front bar, I've been using this for a while for solo builds. It's Temporal Guard, And this is because while slotted, we gain minor protection. So that's the 8% damage reduction. This makes your shields take less damage, which means your shields last longer before they get to your health. And so it's just really good to have slotted on your front bar for that passive damage reduction. And through our passives as well, we get a third shield by blocking. And that's because we have that Psijic Order skill on our front bar. So you can see with just that and our ward, we're basically at 100% damage shield, and then we have our Ice Heart, which is going to stack on top of that, meaning we have more damage shield than we actually have health, and 2 of them are free. So really, really good. Back bar now, this is going to be our other lightning staff. We have DAEDRIC Prey here. This is mostly for the buff to our pets, so you can see that second paragraph there. While the curse is active, your pets deal 40% damage to the target. So 40% extra damage. It is single target though, keep that in mind. So we're really just going to save this for the big boss fights. And then we do want to recast that every 6 seconds to keep that buff going for our pets. Next we got Blockade. This is doing decent damage right now in Scalebreaker, but we mostly want it for the chance to proc off balance. Once you have off balance, you can hit them with a shock enchant to get that bonus damage, as well as a lot of Magicka sustain when your enemy is off balance. And as well, this is also proccing our weapon damage enchant. I think the cost is like doubling almost next patch for Dragonhold, but I still probably will run this just for the utility, again, for the off balance and for the glyph proccing. Then you got to double power your pets, so make sure that's here somewhere. Got them right there on the third ability. And then for our heal here, in Scalebreaker, we've actually switched this to Crit Surge, which is typically the Stam morph. That's because this morph is giving us Major Brutality, not Sorcery, so it's kind of useless for that. But we are getting our Major Sorcery here from Structured Entropy, so that's good. And the nice thing about this is the heal is actually stronger than the other morph. The Power Surge morph has been in the past. I believe they buffed the Crit Surge heal, so it's a very, very strong heal every second. It's passive, you don't have to do anything. Just keep this buff up, keep your shields up, and you will live through most encounters. It's really good. And then Boundless Storm is our last normal ability here. We're using this for the Major Resolve and Major Ward. A little bit of speed boost for 4 seconds, and then just extra passive dot damage. This can help proc your Crit Surge, just gives you extra chance for crits, so why not? For our ultimate here, I do like the Greater Storm Atronach. That's because it's getting buffed by our DAEDRIC Prey, which we're already running that. That's also shock damage, so it is getting buffed by Elemental Succession. And why I really like this too is it has a almost 30-second duration. So depending on the fight, let's say if I'm getting lots of ultimate back, maybe from killing undead, you can have more than one of these up at a time because it just lasts so long. And it's just passive damage, so you can focus on your survivability, making sure your shield is up, making sure your buffs are up, all the while you have your pets doing damage, and you can just worry about staying alive. So it's really good for soloing, good for newer players, good for all builds, really. So definitely check that out. You can also run, say, Ice Comet there. You can run the Destruction Staff Ultimate if you want more burst damage. Those are some other options there. So that's the skills. Again, some of these may be changing when it comes to the Dragonhold DLC. We'll just have to kind of wait and see for that. But right now it's working very, very well for the solo builds. In terms of rotation and what buffs and skills, obviously you want to keep up your defensive buffs, your healing crit surge. Those need to be up 100% of the time. And then usually I will start on my back bar, just turning on the pet, putting on my wall, and then DAEDRIC Prey. And then bar swap, and just make sure your 2 dots are up. So that's Entropy, and then our Shock Staff. And from there you can just maybe hit like a heavy attack, especially if you have an off balance going. Make sure you're getting your heavy attacks in. And then just go back to the back bar, make sure your buffs are up, rinse and repeat. Drop your ultimate, keep your dots up, heavy attack, and then obviously keep your shields up as well. And block as necessary when those boss heavy attacks come in. You'll get a lot of damage shield protection there. So very simple, build, simple rotation, easy to maintain. Now, as far as our passives, let's check those out really quick while these guys fight for us in the background. Oh, he's dead. Okay. Class skills. You definitely want to pick up most of these here. So Unholy Knowledge reduces the cost of your abilities. Very good. Pick that up. Blood Magic. You do get healing on Dark Magic abilities, but you'll notice that we are not using any of these. So like me, if you're not using that, you can just not pick that up if you want. Persistence is okay. You get a little bit of cost reduction after blocking, which we will block on a solo build for sure. And then you'll get Minor Prophecy again, but you have to run a Dark Magic skill there. DAEDRIC Summoning, this is where your more juicy passives are going to be on a pet build. So you get Magicka back when your pet is killed or unsummoned. I believe that works on the ultimate as well. This also reduces the cost of your ultimates by 15%. So that Power Stone passive, that is so good. Make sure you pick that up. DAEDRIC Protection, also very, very good for the stamina recovery. That's going to keep our stamina recovery nice and high while we have a pet slotted. And then Expert Summoner as well. This is great because we get 8% max health while our pet is active. So this gets us very good health, you guys, in light armor, sitting at 19k health. So this passive is definitely part of that. Make sure you pick up that one. Storm Calling, these are not bad either. You get the Capacitor, the 10% Magicka recovery there, which is good. You get increased shock damage from Energized. Make sure you pick up that one as well. Amplitude, that's increased damage done based on their health. So more damage there. And then we do get some passive spell damage here for having some sorcerer abilities slotted. So pick that up. Under your weapon skills, the nice thing is that we're just doing double Destro. So you don't need anything but Destruction Staff passives. Make sure you pick up all of these. They're very good, very strong. Under light armor, obviously pick up all of these. And make sure you're running at least 5 pieces of light. That gives you access to the bonus spell critical and the extra spell penetration there. If you're running heavy and medium, you can pick up some of these as well. You really only need the first 3 in heavy armor. That'll give you the most benefit there. I'm a vampire, like I said, so I am getting some extra recovery here. Also, if you went all the way to stage 4, you'd get the Undeath passive and a little bit extra health recovery, which is not bad. Fighters Guild, I talked about this earlier. The only thing you really need is Banish the Wicked because this gives you 9 ultimate when you're killing undead. This is very good for generating ultimate fast based on the enemies that you're fighting. Under Mages Guild, we do get extra Magicka recovery. From the Magicka controller passive, this gives us 2% per ability. And then since we're running Entropy and Inner Light on the front bar, we have 4%. So we're actually getting 4% Magicka recovery and 4% max Magicka on top of what we're already getting for using Inner Light. So that's really, really good. Psijic Order, you'll definitely want Concentrated Barrier. This is the damage shield that we talked about. Almost a 6k damage shield just by blocking. So pick that up if you have access to Psijic. Undaunted as well, if you have access to those. I don't. Nothing here in Alliance War. Obviously, your racial passive, super important. And then always pick up Medicinal Use under Alchemy. This makes your potions last 30% longer. And last but not least, let's talk about champion points, which is definitely important for a solo build. So this is what I would recommend for 810 CP. And if you don't have 810, I'll tell you kind of what to focus on. So 37 into Warlord, 16 into Sprinter, 49 Tenacity, 64 Arcanist, 27 into Mooncalf. You could drop some from Mooncalf if you want. I definitely recommend Tenacity though, because this gives you very good sustain when you are heavy attacking. 37 into Shadow Ward, 40 into Tumbling. Honestly, I just have most of these for the Treasure Hunter passive so I can get more out of treasure chests. You do not need as much here if you don't have as much champion points as me. In the blue tree, 15 Blessed, 40 into Elfborn, 49 into Elemental Expert, 28 into Spell Erosion, 63 into Staff Expert. Now again, that's just for that heavy attacking. So if you're not focused on heavy attacks, So this is amping our heavy attack damage even more. Like we said, if you got the Maelstrom staff on your back bar, that's going to amp it. Spider Cultist also amps it quite a bit. And then we've got this 30% extra damage on our heavy attack. I definitely recommend pumping this up. Now 75 into Thaumaturge, that's mostly for the Exploiter passive. But again, this patch dots are very strong. So this is buffing our dots by 23%. So very, very strong CP node currently. Definitely run that in the Scalebreaker DLC. 56 into Ironclad. 56 into Hardy and Elemental Defender. 34 into Thick Skinned. I had one left over here for Light Armor Focus. 27 into Quick Recovery. And then 40 into Bastion. Now, Bastion is specific to Iceheart. If you are using the Iceheart set, then definitely put some points here in Bastion because that increases your damage shield. If you're not doing Iceheart, you can just drop those points if you want. This is not going to affect your Hardened Ward really because that's already capped by your health. So again, only drop points there if you're using Iceheart. That's what I would recommend at least. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap up this updated Magicka Sorcerer solo PVE build. If you guys enjoyed this video, as always, don't forget to crush that like button and leave a comment below. It really does help out the video to get noticed on YouTube, which I always appreciate. This build has been really, really fun to play this patch. It's super strong. I'm still playing it right now, actually. I'm just going through different dungeons, soloing those. I might actually record a few solo dungeon videos if you guys want to see some of that stuff on the channel. Please let me know in the comments and I'll try to do that coming up here soon. For now, I'm just going to leave a world boss fight for you guys so you can see kind of how the build looks and plays if you're interested. As always, thanks everybody so much for watching, and I'll see you around in the next video.
Why does this filth of fruit